We have the pleasure of being joined by our most esteemed guest, the number one guest on the Ostrom Avenue podcast in terms of total number of appearances, Brent Axe of Syracuse.com. Brent, this is your sixth time now joining the Ostrom Avenue podcast.
Wow. Let's go. I feel like, what's that on Saturday Night Live? The Five Timers Club? And
Yeah.
I'm climbing even higher than that. That's fantastic.
Brent, you've almost been on as much as I have.
How about that? You got to catch
Brent's
up.
Brent's more experienced than Hudson.
Yeah, by far.
Can I get something to put on my little shelf here that says Six Timers Club?
We should get that.
Avenue Pod. I'll put it right up here.
Let's get him a little plaque, a little certificate.
I would love that.
We'll put that on Ethan's docket when he gets back from Viva Las Vegas. He seems to be enjoying himself out there, and
how could you not?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, he's getting to interview Adam Shine at Radio Row. They talked to Field Yates for like 40 minutes yesterday about fantasy football.
By the way, I've never been to Radio Row. I love that the past few years, Syracuse has been sending students there because it is just a treasure trove. And we've talked about this in my class, but it is a treasure trove of some of the best and worst interviews you'll ever hear in your life. And there's no in between. There's no meh interview at Radio Row. You either get like some NFL legend and they're telling stories till the cows come home, or you just get some guy that's like making the rounds at like 10 o'clock on a Wednesday on behalf of like Burger King, and they're just terrible. And you have to figure it out. Right. And it's my one regret. It's my one regret really from no longer being in the radio world. And I didn't get to experience that, but maybe we'll bring the podcast out there sometime.
That would be awesome. Syracuse Sports at Radio Row. That would be bring the Super Bowl back to MetLife Stadium. Then you guys should make the trip down.
There you go. Or
if the Bills make the Super Bowl, realistically,
you just stole my thunder there. When the Bills make
yes. Okay, good. When the Bills make the Super Bowl. Yes.
Keeping the faith.
Well, a big topic that could have been great at Radio Row this week was obviously the Benny Williams news came down yesterday. He has been officially dismissed from the Syracuse basketball program. And Brent, I just want to get your initial reactions when you found out the news yesterday. And I saw you guys did an emergency podcast with Mike Waters. Kind of what is your initial reaction from Benny Williams being dismissed from the program?
I was still surprised that they did it now because, to my knowledge, guys, I could be wrong about this. Somebody might swoop in and say you forgot about this. There was a number of players that were disciplined in the Jim Boeheim era, right? Either by the head coach or the school itself. I cannot recall Boeheim flat out dismissing a player from the roster during the season, right? So for that to happen with 9 games to go, that's still startling. But the reasoning behind it is not. I mean, this has been well documented with Benny. You go back to last year when he had his mental health day, through everything we've seen this year, both the violation of team rules. The most telling one to me, guys, I guess it's a tie between what we saw in the Wake Forest game just recently, but that Cornell game when he's sitting on the bench and he's slumped over, we have pictures of it on Syracuse.com, and he looks like he'd be anywhere else than sitting on that bench. He's not in the team huddle. He's disengaged. He's just all over the place. I've heard stories this year of Benny getting up, leaving the bench and going into the back, and somebody had to go grab him and bring him back out, right? Then the Wake Forest game, bumping Autry, technical foul, throws the ball behind him, right? You can't, and see what happened, guys, is Benny loses the benefit of the doubt. This is not just, everyone gets frustrated, right? Bad call, something happens, you throw the basketball. He does not have the benefit of the doubt there. But then at the end of the game, he leaves the bench, and you can clearly see Coach Griffin trying to bring him back. It's like, so this is the stuff we know. So what don't we know? What's happening at practice every day that we don't see? What's happening behind the scenes? And it was telling to see the players responding. And here in 2024, you guys know well, your generation speaks emoji, right? And that's how they react to these things. So I think they can be upset that they're losing their teammate and their friend, but they see it every day, and they have to know that Autry had to do this. And I wrote a column after that press conference that Autry had after the Wake Forest game. I said, this is not just about rallying the troops here to play better against Louisville. That felt like, to me, a you're either with me or you're not moment. That was Autry fully taking command of this team, giving a chance from the players that returned from last year to kind of see his way. This is what it is. They lose again. Now think of all the double-digit losses they've had, but the two that really, stand out are North Carolina and Wake Forest. and Red had finally had it. So I think that was him putting his foot down, not just on you got to play hard against Louisville, but this is how it's going to be going forward.
You mentioned that we had, seen this throughout the year with Benny Williams. In that Cornell game, I went on the double overtime to talk with it after the game. The most excited he got all game was watching the hot dog race come across, and he didn't talk to anybody else the entire game. So the writing was on the wall, and I talked with that about Jordan a little earlier in the show. It felt like it was going to come, and if you thought Benny Williams was going to be on the team next season, you were crazy. It was just a matter of when. And so, in my opinion, Benny Williams doesn't really control how good or not this team is, but because of the depth and the big man depth, in my mind, it almost feels like at this point, getting rid of Benny Williams feels like punting on the season, even though, he doesn't control how good or not this team is. What do you feel like a successful season still looks like after Benny Williams' departure and after that Wake Forest loss?
That's a great question, Hudson, because Benny Williams had an important role on this team, but I agree with you. I don't think he tilts. Like, how many wins is Benny Williams worth, right? It's 0. How many wins is Judah Mintz worth? Like, we can do an over-under on that. You can do an over-under on certain players. Benny doesn't fit that category, but he's so important off the bench, 6'9", athletic, can attack the rim, but he just never quite got there as a full-time player. That's why, obviously, he didn't start this year. So now with 9 games to go, you're Autry. You have a total lack of size anyway, and now you just lost one of your bigger, more athletic players. So you got to go 3 guards at times with Judah, JJ, and Kyle Cuff. You're putting in Peter Carey and Monir Hema now, who's struggling through back issues physically. He's limited in the minutes he can play, but you've got to push him a little more to see what he can bring you, right? And the plan was to redshirt William Patterson. I still think that's going to happen, but do you rethink that because the numbers dwindled a little bit? You put Malik back at the 4. Like, we're going to see the lineup combinations and how they do that with 9 games to go. But Hudson, you said it. I'm sorry, you're punting on this season now. They had an uphill climb just to get on the bubble with Benny Williams. Now, without Benny Williams, it is much more important for Autry to establish the way they play. This is how it's going to be under me the rest of the year. And look, I said at the beginning of the season, if we got to middle of February and this team was in the conversation for the NCAA tournament, you had to accept that. The problem is, this more than likely now is going to be the 3rd straight year that Syracuse misses the NCAA tournament. That is an eternity in this town, okay? That has not happened since the late 1960s when Nixon was president. You had to give Red the benefit of the doubt to put his own system into place here, but he's still connected to that. It'd be one thing if this was like a Fran Brown situation for football, coming in clean, and you have to be fair about not tying him to the last administration. Red doesn't get that benefit, even though he's trying to establish his own thing, as we're seeing before our very eyes.
How does looking at next year with, the 2 recruits coming in, Elijah Moore and Donnie Freeman, who I saw your tweet is now in the top 10 of the 1-3 rankings. How does looking, forward to that? I know Syracuse fans want to make the NCAA tournament, and that's kind of the goal of every single season. How much does that positive trend in terms of the recruiting with 2 top 100 guys coming in affect their kind of thoughts right now as the team stands currently?
Well, it can't hurt that you have 2 players of that caliber coming in. And I was talking about this with somebody the other day. So let's say they go to the NIT, and normally the reasoning to go to the NIT is development for next year. Well, what kind of team is this going to be next year? We know Benny's gone. We're in the transfer portal era. Who knows who else could dip their toe into that and want to leave? Some names maybe we're not anticipating that will want to move on. We're all under the assumption one way or the other Judah Mintz is moving on, right? I think JJ Starling is going to return, but that's the thing. You get to the end of the season and everybody's open for possibility. So what is next year's team with Elijah Moore and with Donnie Freeman? Freeman is going to come in as not only somebody, just look at the rankings. You mentioned it. He slipped into the top 10 in On3's top 10 ranking this week, and I'm sure the others will follow suit at some point. And they need that type of player, Jordan. So the expectation on Donnie is going to be through the roof just by the sheer ranking he brings in and the talent that he brings to the table. You know who else was a highly regarded recruit coming in? Benny Williams. right? So learn your lesson from that. I like what I see from Elijah Moore, but that's a lot to hand over to a freshman. But guess what? That's college basketball these days. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. That's my main frustration with this team is people talk about how young it is. And now I think we're like, it's all sophomores pretty much on this roster, which I've never seen that. I'll tell you a quick story. Jason Stark comes up to Mike Waters and I at one of the, I can't remember which, it was the Miami game. It was the Quadir Copeland game. And Jason, as you guys know, you follow him. He loves quirky stats. And he said, when's the last time that Syracuse basketball went through a season and you don't have a freshman or a senior in the stats? And I was like, holy crap, that is incredible that is going to be a thing for Syracuse. And Mike did look it up and he put it in his most recent mailbox. So quick aside there. So what Moore and Freeman bring to the table is a good question because, well, what's the rest of the team look like? Who are the 2 or 3 transfers we don't know are on this team that they need to go get and what the makeup of this thing is going to be?
It's really kind of difficult to tell what position they're going to, fully target outside of center, because obviously center is going to have to be a need. Looking around in terms of transfers and coming back, you don't get a whole lot that come back to Syracuse. And now I believe the last one was Eastern Michigan transfer and in the early 2010s. And, who cares? But now pivoting to Joe Girard, coming back to the Dome, big game on Saturday against Clemson at noon, who's coming off a win at UNC. There's a lot of emotions in how people feel about Joe Girard. I think a lot of the student body has more of a negative take on Joe Girard, whereas, some people in the city may not have as negative of an opinion. Do you think Joe Girard will be booed when he returns to the JMA Wireless Dome? And if so, at what level?
See, that's it. The answer is yes. There will be some dopes out there that will boo this kid. Now, look, once the ball goes up, he plays for Clemson. Boo him all you want, right? He's on the other team. You're supposed to. But there's a respect that I think has to be put there beforehand for the blood, sweat, and tears that he put in. And a lot of things that were put on Joe Girard's shoulders that to me were not his fault. Now, we can go through the layers here. The same fans that were bitching and moaning, wherever they were bitching and moaning, mostly on social media these days, about Joe Girard, would be the same fans complaining if Girard had picked Notre Dame or Duke or Penn State over Syracuse. Joe Girard was one of the most hyped New York State recruits that I've seen in my life. And all I heard then was Jim Boeheim's got to get Joe Girard. He's right down the road in Glens Falls. And they got Joe Girard. And Girard comes in. He was often out of position. He was asked to do things he shouldn't have done. Look, I wrote this, and Boeheim and I went toe-to-toe on this. And I'm sorry, I was right about this. Kadari Richmond should have played over Joe Girard. Boeheim screwed that up. He just flat out screwed that up. That's not Joe's fault. That's just better player. Look at Kadari Richmond. He could be the biggest player of the year, right? Joe fell into that trap, okay? The biggest fault you could say about Joe Girard here, guys, and if you disagree, that's fine, is he wasn't the best defensive player. But is that why you recruited Joe Girard to play defense? In a defense he shouldn't be in, by the way? So I don't get it. If you're going to boo Joe Girard, you're just a troll. Flat, plain, simple. You have no reason to, and you have no appreciation for what he brought to the table. Oh, and by the way, he's shooting 43% from three-point range. He just dropped 21 points on North Carolina, and he's killing it. So you want to boo him if he's dropping 8 3-pointers on Syracuse? Go right ahead, because that's the opponent. But to think that this kid, who did nothing but play his ass off, loved Syracuse, loved Jim Boeheim, chose Syracuse over all those other offers, is some sort of pariah because he had the gall to transfer somewhere, which happens all the time now in college sports. Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the offensive side, people forget that he led the team in scoring last year, even with Judah Mintz in his freshman year. And I agree with you on the defensive side. The defense just wasn't suited for him. Like, he wasn't a long guy in the zone. It kind of, limited his ability to play defense. Probably would have been better at a little bit better at man-to-man. And he's a shooter. He shot 38% for Syracuse last year, which the team could desperately need right now. On
Yeah,
this,
where
on this year's
where are
squad.
all these people that said Joe should have gone to Siena or something like that? He's one of the best players in the ACC this year. Like, just stop.
You mentioned his lack of athleticism. I don't think there are basketball players at that level with that little athleticism that often. That little size and athleticism with that much impact. I think we also have to credit what Joe Girard does with what he has, because he doesn't have a lot except his ability to shoot, and he uses that to become, one of the better players in the country and one of the not just better but best shooters in the country. So we do have to credit him.
They could use him on this team.
100%.
Now, what does that do with JJ? Like, we can argue that till the cows come home. And is JJ on this team? If Joe's still on this team, it's revisionist history. But look at this team and the glaring lack of game in, game out 3-point shooting. You're telling me you wouldn't want this kid around for another year if you feel that way? I just don't know what to tell you.
It all depends on that system. It all depends on how many threes he's taking too and what part of the system is. But I agree. Him being part of this team changes the entire dynamic, at least having one consistent shooter.
And again, I have to reiterate something here. Like, the complaints that people would have is like, oh, he's friends with Buddy and all these. It's like 95% of what you're saying is not his fault. Your beef is with Jim Boeheim or somebody else, not with Joe Girard, who's just going out there and doing his job. And look, I'm biased in a way, guys, because Joe's a great kid. I got to know Joe a little bit. Mike Waters and I went to Glens Falls and did a story with him when he was going through his recruiting process. And I spent the day with him and I saw what he means to that town and who he interacted with. And I interviewed Joe when I had my radio show weekly and got to know him a little bit, off the air, if you a little bit. So I will fully admit my bias here, but put that aside. If I didn't know Joe Girard, from Joe Cool, I would assess the situation and look at it fairly, like, what exactly is your complaint here?
So one quick last two-parter question on the Joe Girard return revenge, however you want to, chop it up to be. One, did you ever have the Joe Girard at Dunkin' in the local area? And then two, your favorite memory from Joe Girard. Hudson and I were talking about one of the memories from last year when he accidentally saved it straight into Pete Nance in the North Carolina game. It was an unfortunate one. But if there's any happy memories that you have of Joe Girard.
One, I unfortunately never had the Girard. What was the Girard special at Dunkin'?
It was, I don't remember what drink it was. I just remember there was a Joe Girard.
Oh, it was a hot chocolate. He's a hot chocolate.
I think it was a hot chocolate.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was a hot chocolate.
I have had the Dunkin' hot chocolate, so if that's his deal, then yeah, I guess I have participated in the Joe Girard special. So I'll have to go down to my local Dunkin' Donuts. You guys still got that special? And I can see if I can get it. In terms of memories, that's an interesting question, because I remember when Joe left, and I wrote a column about this, and I was going through it, and I think maybe this affected how people feel about Girard. He never had that moment. He never had, like Jerry McNamara had 5, just pop off the page, the 6 3-pointers in the championship game, the 2006 Big East tournament, beat Notre Dame, beat Georgetown on buzzer beaters, just had this treasure trove of memories that just lock in your head. Did Girard have any of those? Did he have any buzzer beaters? Did he have any game winners? He was on a team, of course, that one didn't make the tournament, but was in a tournament, but that was Buddy's turn. Yeah, Buddy, you carried that team to the Sweet 16. So I don't have a basketball memory in particular. They just all kind of blend together, but it's just that image of Girard on the wing, catch, shoot 3, and just like that vision of what you have. When I watched Girard when he was in Glens Falls, scoring 5,000 points plus in high school, and I'm just like envisioning like he's the next one that can step in and do what Jerry did, what Andy Routens did, what Trevor Cooney did, just go through the line of those 3-point shooters that Syracuse has had. And there he was doing it.
It can be kind of tough to talk about a losing team for so long. There's only so many times you can talk about a team that continually misses NCAA tournaments. This women's team, though, Brent, likely, I mean, at this point, it would be tough for them to miss the tournament with, how well they played earlier in the season. They've kind of hit a little bit of a snag in the last 2 weeks. And, a big win over Boston College to just get back on track. They needed DeAsia Fair to score 38 points in that game. And Felicia said it after the game. We needed DeAsia to score those 38 points for us to win that game. what do you think this team's ceiling now becomes with some of these, recent struggles against good teams, albeit Virginia Tech and Louisville? But Syracuse now is kind of fallen down a peg. Where do you see the ceiling being come NCAA tournament?
Felicia's in an interesting spot because they did need Deja to score 38 points in that game, and the rest of the team scored 37 combined, right? When you have a star like that, you have to be so cognizant of, are they hot? Are they not? Are they in it? You don't want them just bombing away if they're not in it. And Deja's rarely not in it. She is locked in and one of the best players in the country. I mean, Caitlin Clark scored 38 points that day as well. Syracuse's issue, of course, is size. So when they're going to run into teams that have, they rebound their butt off and they overcome it by how they play, right? That team, the men's team should take a lesson. At the very least, every single game, Felicia's teams, they're exhausted at the end of the game. That's never an issue with this team. So the issue is, you're going to run into a team with size. Are you counting too much on Deja? You have just some other great elements on this team that have stepped in. She has the support now. Their mission now is get in the top 4, get a home game, get the home game for the NCAA tournament. Charlie Cream's latest bracketology has him as a 6 going to Manhattan. That's Kansas, by the way, not New York City, to take on Texas A&M. Then it would be Kansas State if they won, right? Is there time for Syracuse to slide into a top 4 seed? I think there is. I think they can absolutely convince the bracketologists to slide them up there. It's what you said, though. They've just hit these bumps in the road as of late that have knocked them back from this. Still a great team. It's still going to be a tournament team. It's incredible how Felicia has, first she had to fix the culture and did that in a snap, which was incredible. Now you fix the basketball and you ride this mega superstar comet of a player that Deja Fair is, as far as you can go. But you want to start, not that Georgia Woolley doesn't score, not that Elena Rice doesn't do her thing, and not that Hyman does. Everybody contributes. But I think going forward, who's truly the Robin to the Batman role that Deja Fair plays?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was on the call of the St. Rose exhibition, and their coach actually called Georgia at the beginning of the year. Georgia Woolley is Deja Fair's Robin to her Batman.
There you go.
And luckily, we heard earlier this morning from Media Ops that Isa Verajao is back as of Thursday. Will be available. So that's a big get back
Little
in
boost
front
at the end of the
court
year,
for sure. You mentioned Felicia Leggett, Jack, just in her second year having this team rolling in the top of the ACC. How impressive is it for FLJ for what she's done in the last, not even full 2 years, in the last year and a half with this program?
It's striking what she has done in such a quick period of time. Coach Q had success here. There's just look at the results, the Final Four in 2016, the players that he developed that went to the WNBA, Tiana Mangakahia, and what there's no question that what he did on the court turned around Syracuse women's basketball, which, guys, I can't tell you. You've seen the numbers. You've probably seen the media guides. For a long time, Syracuse women's basketball just struggled. And year after year after year, just several sub 500 teams, they just could not get it together until Coach Q came in. Now, they had their moments, don't get me wrong, but it was just a consistently bad program that finally got turned around. But of course, we learned the Coach Q story and the culture issues that were happening there and what he got caught up in. That's a major thing. So for FLJ to come in and just clean that up, set the standard, sometimes that doesn't always work, right? When you have a coach that has that enthusiasm and that passion, and you have to keep that up, and you have to make that contagious. You have to make that something that spreads through the team. Find the right people. Now, let's be honest here. The transfer portal really helped that process and would help any coach in her position. She brings in Deja from Buffalo and the players that have come in. So that helped. But you still have to develop chemistry. You still have to get them to buy in, play on the court, and do what you do. And she has done an amazing job with that. And it all harkens back on, you guys have talked to Coach Jack. I love all these expressions she comes back to, and these are her philosophies, and it translates through. I think hiring Sue Ludwig was just an incredible move. I've seen Sue coach here in Syracuse for years. She's a great person, a great coach. And This kind of harkens to something that John Wildhack has done, guys, which at first I was a little skeptical of, but I get why he had to do it. Gary Gait, skin in the game, Syracuse. Kayla Trainer, skin in the game, Syracuse. Obviously sticks with Autry instead of going outside. But the most important program of any of those that needed someone with skin in the game, knows Syracuse, loves Syracuse, gets what it means to be Syracuse, was Felicia Leggett-Jack. Like, she was the hire. I campaigned for her to coach this team for over a year, and also for Syracuse to retire her number and be the first female athlete to have her number retired. And to Syracuse's credit, they did both of those things. I don't care what other coaches were out there that had some kind of basketball acumen or some assistant out there that was ready to take it. She had to coach this team. And the stars aligned for her to do it, and now we're seeing the full result of it.
It's an awesome story because she also went to Nottingham High School, which is right down the road from Syracuse. And you mentioned Deasia Fair earlier. We said, 38 points on Sunday. Caitlin Clark also scored 38. She's one if not a top 3 player in the NCAA, especially at the guard position. I think that's without a doubt. And we talked about earlier the Buddy Boeheim run in the tournament. Are we kind of gearing up where potentially Deasia Fair could lead this team going, for 30 plus points a game in the NCAA tournament?
I'm not going to say no to that, especially if you get the bracket gives you some random, like the Texas A&M, they're not going to know, right? Let's say that holds. Charlie Cream's bracketology is right. You get like a Texas A&M. They're not going to know. They'll watch the film and be like, the most amazing thing about Deasia, she's 5'5", and she does all this. I was talking to Kelly Gramlich the other day from the ACC Network, and that's the thing Kelly kept coming back to. She's 5'5" and can just do that step back J, and will take on all comers, right? So you're Texas A&M, you're going to watch that film. You're going to 5'5", we'll double team her, we'll do this or that. You can't stop her. You just can't. And if somebody truly says, you're not going to beat us today, it's what we talked about earlier. Someone has to step up there. But the key to that, I think if this team is going to make a run, they got to get the home game, because I think this is a fair weather town, guys. Okay, they're the men's team. By then, who knows where we're at with them. And we're in this spot where Syracuse fans are so hungry for any kind of March Madness. People will get behind this program. They will get a good crowd there. Won't be like 25,000, don't get me wrong, but people will buy in and they will support this team, and it could lift them right into the Sweet 16, which, by the way, if things hold, is in Albany. So you hope they make a run, because it reminds me of the 2003 men's basketball team. They went through Boston and Albany to get through to the Final Four that year. So this could really line up for this team if they play their cards right.
Home court advantage after home court advantage would be, top notch for this team. It would be massive. And you're right. There still is time for them to slide into that spot. There's a lot of time also for men's lacrosse to make it to Memorial Day weekend. So, with this men's lacrosse team, we've only seen them for 2 games at this point. But in those 2 games, the offense has looked undeniable. It has. And you could argue, Colgate played, a weird way on defense, and Vermont lost some key defensive pieces, but it doesn't matter. This offense is firing in all cylinders, and Joey Spallina had 16 points through 2 games. What have you seen from this team so far in comparison to last year in ways that they've improved?
I've seen the ball moving more. I've seen a free-flowing offense, and it's important to note that this team had offensive players last year, but the ball didn't move because they just didn't have enough at the midfield. Jake Stevens, Sam English come in, open things up on the midfield. Michael Leo, a year older and wiser. Jackson Burtwistle's hurt right now. I think he'll be back for the Manhattan game, but once he gets back into the flow, there's somebody who moves the ball and just a flat-out score. He had 27 goals and no assists last year. You know what Birdie's out there to do. Mason Cote has obviously made a huge difference at the face-off X. You look at the relationship between Joey Spallina and Christian Moulet, right? It was huge what they talked about after their opening win, about they had played together in Team 91. It was a club program on Long Island. There's a little bit of an age gap between Joey and Christian, but they still played on a lot of the same teams. And Joey got elevated a little bit in his age group because he's, a phenomenon. Joe Spallina coached them. So not only that, Stevens and English come in and they know Owen Hiltz. and they know Finn Thompson from that kind of Canadian lacrosse community, right? Joey Spallina goes up to Canada for the summer and plays box lacrosse, which, guys, Canadian box lacrosse, you cannot be soft and play in that league. Like, you will get your butt. They don't care who you are. Okay. You're going to go through the ringer up there. Joey spends the summer with Trey Deer, who's going to work his way in as a freshman at attack, right? Here's my big question. Will Mark's going to have to save the day at some point. He hasn't had to yet, but he's going to have to. And he's going to have to save the day against Maryland. Okay. That's what I'm looking towards. I think Syracuse will handle its business against Manhattan in the John Ordonia reunion special coming up at the Dome on Friday. Let's see Maryland. Let's see a run with that team. Let's see Will Mark make some saves. Let's see that defense go one-on-one with that attack and that team. And then I'm really going to get a sense of it. That being said, Gary Gait reloaded everywhere he had to. He's got more guns on the offensive side, and they're just going to have to win games like that. There's just going to be some games it's going to be like, okay, giddy up, 18-16, back and forth, shootout type of games. Did you see that Denver Hopkins game the other day? They're going to have to win probably 2 or 3 games like that. Just at the end, who's got the ball last, giddy up kind of thing.
You mentioned the reload that Gary Gait has had, and you bring in Christian Muley from Lehigh, and you mentioned that both him and Spallina played on Team 91, difference in age, but Spallina getting promoted and them playing together. There was a lot of conversation before the season started about, maybe Muley would play a little bit more at X and have Spallina roam a little bit more, but we've seen Spallina at X, especially in that Colgate game, pretty much the entire time. Do you see kind of maybe later in the season having Spallina roam a little bit more and having Muley at X? How do you feel like those two really mesh together?
I think you go with what works right now, and Spallina can do it. But I don't see how you don't incorporate that to allow Spallina to be free, because what's going to happen is good teams are going to see trends on film. They did it last year. If you look at Joey still put up points. If you watch how teams defended Spallina at the end of last year, they knew it was coming, and they knew he didn't have the weapons to take some pressure off him. Now he does. The thing I'm a minor concern, 3 out of 10 concern here, Muley can't go to both hands. So if you're going to operate behind the cage, you got to be able to effectively go to both hands. And I don't think he's quite there yet, but they didn't have anybody else that could do it last year. Now that Finn Thompson's not that guy, he's a different type of player. He's a versatile player. He can go up to midfield if you need him to. Frankly, I wouldn't be stunned if they put Spallina in midfield just to mess with teams, because he could do it, right? If Trey Deer's knocking on the door and you want to put an attack out there, Finn Thompson, Christian Muley, and Trey Deer, and put Joey up in midfield and watch the other team like, what the hell's going on out there? That's the kind of weapons they have. But I fully anticipate at some point you're gonna see Muley kind of quarterback this thing a little bit more. But you got to let Joey be Joey, right? It's kind of like what we were saying about DeAsia Fair. Like you just got to let him roll when he's rolling.
Yeah, Joey, 16 points in the first 2 games last year, only 6 points in the first 2 games. The difference between freshman year and sophomore year. It's funny you mentioned moving Joey to midfield. I can only imagine what John Danowski and Lars Tiffany's reactions would be if Joey just magically comes out on the first line midfield at the beginning of the game. They would definitely be extremely probably shook.
I'd love to see it.
Obviously, men's basketball is not necessarily on top of the world. One last question here for you. What are you looking forward to most over the next kind of couple months? Women's basketball, potential NCAA tournament. Men's lacrosse could be getting back to the NCAA tournament, could not. We didn't talk about that today, but women's lacrosse has their opener this weekend against #1 Northwestern. So what are you most excited for, in the 3-1-5 in the next month or two?
I can't lie to you guys. Those are all great candidates. I'm excited about spring football. I want to see what Fran Brown brings to the table. I want to see what kind of access we get as media. Holy crap, we can talk to the assistant coaches. Let's go. But the reason I answer that question that way, guys, is shameless plug. We've got this new thing we're doing at Syracuse.com. It's called the Syracuse Sports Insiders. And in a nutshell, you can text me and I text you. It's a direct text messaging program. And the connection that I have made with these fans. And the beauty of it is they tell me what they want. And they certainly want to hear about all those things you mentioned. And basketball, this is a basketball town. It's always going to be a thing. But they cannot get enough football. And that's to Fran Brown's credit, because he's been feeding them like real stuff. Transfers, recruits. There was a string there every day. I was like, Fran, can you calm down? All these players, I need a day off. But I love that this football fan base is engaged. They're into it because of all the other sports. I love lacrosse. I played the sport. It's in my heart, and basketball is what it is. It's just, it's the machine in this town, and the general interest there and the things that we cover. We're so lucky to cover a lot of these things, almost like you would in a pro sports town. But the feeling when the football team is on top, there's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. And the fact that I have people salivating on February 7th for football, and when spring football comes, and by the way, so they're going to go through spring football, and then they're going to combine the spring football game with the last lacrosse game of the year against Virginia when Paul Gates, number 19, goes up. Finally, it should have been up years ago. It should have been up with Gary last year, but beggars can't be choosers here. Think of that day, April 20th. What could be on the line there for the lacrosse team? Celebrating Paul Gait and what I think is going to be the biggest attendance we've ever seen for a spring football game, which is not even a football game, but I don't think people care. They just want to be a part of it. So I'm looking forward to spring football, seeing the new guys on the field, how Fran Brown does this, hearing from the assistant coaches, all culminating with that April 20th day, which will be a lot of fun.
I'm excited for the football season too. I mean, Ethan's in Las Vegas right now. Hopefully, I know you're probably going to go. Hopefully I get the chance to go to Las Vegas for the UNLV game next year.
I'm going.
We're going to have to brag to him at that point.
My boss doesn't know it yet, but I am going to Las Vegas. Like that's happening. I've never been. I've never been to.
I've never been to Las Vegas either.
No, I haven't either. There's nothing for me to do in Las Vegas.
I'm excited for everything that could come in Las Vegas next year, and the football season is just going to be a wild ride in Fran Brown's first year. Brent, just where can everyone see all of your content? You mentioned the Syracuse Sports Insiders and Syracuse Sports a little bit right there.
I appreciate the shameless plug opportunity here. So Syracuse.com, of course, is where you can read. You can follow on the X at Brent Axe Media, but the Syracuse Sports Insiders program has been incredible, guys. If you want to sign up, you can text me directly. I'll text you direct. Don't text me at like 2 a.m. Not that it matters. Thankfully, it doesn't come to my phone. It's like a software that I use. But anytime you have questions, comments, opinions, just want to shoot the breeze, talk SU Sports, what you do is you text the word orange to 315-847-3895. The cool thing is you can try it free for 2 weeks. After that, just $3.99 a month. And like we said, when I broke the Fran Brown had signed a contract story, our insiders got it first. When I broke the Colin McCord story that he was transferring to Syracuse, our insiders got it first. They get everything first. All my opinions, any breaking news that I have, they get it first. And we go from there. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope you guys can come along for the ride.
They get it before he comes on the Ostrom Avenue Podcast, joining the Sixes Club today, Brent. Thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, guys. Look forward to my trophy that I'm going to put up here, and look forward to appearance number 7 soon down the road here.